This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
Everybody has the option.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm wondering what. Hi, Mary, by the way.
Hi, Francis. It's working very well.
Yeah. Guten Abend in Deutschland.
Guten Abend.
Yeah. Now I'm going to stop the recording.
Guten Morgen aus Sedona.
Hi,
This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome all, and I hope you are all safe and all confined in your homes. I would like to reiterate a few things I said yesterday about the upcoming retreats. The California, the Temecula retreats, spring retreats will be either held online only, or if they are held on site, the events will take place on the external patios with 9-foot spacing between chairs and with proper social distancing for the participants. And we won't supply meals on site. So these are the two options. Everybody who has prepaid for the retreat will get a refund, and we have to register again. Regarding the summer retreats in Europe, we don't know yet. We hope for the best, but my feeling is that it's the likelihood is that we still have problems with group meetings and travel, so they are likely to be held also these online only. In both cases, we will have dialogues and guided meditation / yoga sessions online. We will either be using this application if everybody is happy with it, or a different one. In the upcoming weeks, we may road test some other applications for this purpose. So if what I will recommend is for everybody to mute their phone, which is the case now, which is fine, which is perfect. And then whoever has a question, please unmute your phone and ask your question. Okay, no questions, so I have to go with the question that we have online. Raman, I had some thoughts and I wonder if you'd agree with them or not. We use the snake and rope example a lot in Advaita. We usually imply that one, let me check something here, yeah. We usually imply that one should see the rope because that is the true reality. It occurs to me that when one is established in the teaching, one is able to see both the snake and the rope in their respective realities. One is able to enjoy fearlessly playing with the snake, knowing it is only a rope. Another way to say it, one can fearlessly enjoy Maya, knowing it is truly Atman Brahman. Would you agree? Yes, absolutely. That is correct. That's the whole idea. So the analogy of the snake and the rope is like any other analogy, is limited, because once you have discovered that the rope, that the snake that you believe was on the floor is in fact a rope, unless you are a very, very young child and playing with your rope, pretending that it is a snake, is not much fun. So that's where the analogy finds its limits. So then a better analogy is the one of us watching a movie. Somehow we know that the movie is not real, but that doesn't prevent us from pretending it's real for the sake of enjoying it. So it's the same here. So in ignorance, we were in the position of someone who was born in the jungle somewhere out of modern civilization, and all of a sudden would watch a movie on screen or someone on the screen, and then would believe that there is someone in the box. So he would put his hand in the box to touch the person who is in the box. So he would believe that everything that is happening on the screen is real. That would be, in this analogy, what would correspond to ignorance. So in this case, the position of wisdom is one who knows that the movie is a movie and nevertheless enjoys it. And what is interesting in this analogy also is to understand that when we enjoy a movie, the enjoyment is not on the screen. The enjoyment is in us. So when we apply that to the metaphor of consciousness, it means that the enjoyment, the source of enjoyment, is not really that which is perceived, but it is us, the perceiver, which is really the place of enjoyment, the place of happiness. So then that enables us also to understand that one is simultaneously able to see both the snake and the rope, as Raman, you suggested, simultaneously. And in going back to this first analogy, the seeing of the snake is the seeing of the manifestation, the seeing of the movie, the perception of the movie. In this metaphor, the seeing of the rope is the happiness while seeing the movie. So that's a point which is important to understand. The nature of consciousness being aware of itself is the experience of happiness. So in the case of ignorance, when there is a belief that the movie is real, there is suffering. the happiness is gone, meaning we are not seeing the rope, we are seeing only the snake. Seeing the movie, enjoying the movie, is simultaneously seeing the snake and seeing the rope. Another way to say it, yeah, that's what he said. So I said I agree, yes, that was a good, I'm just added a few comments, but Raman, you are absolutely right. What was important to add to it is what the experience of seeing the rope is like. And it is the happiness part in the enjoyment of the movie. Then Haman goes on, I don't know much about lucid dreaming, but if it's being aware that you are asleep while dreaming, then one can be fearless in the dream, knowing their true reality. Yeah. These analogies with lucid dreaming and daydreaming, I don't know really what people mean with lucid dreaming. I know the difference between daydreaming and night dreaming, if you will. In daydreaming, we are still aware of the external world, but we are aware of it in our peripheral, in the periphery of our mind, if you will. The center of our mind is occupied by our daydreaming, by our thoughts. Whereas when we dream at night, this peripheral vision or perception of the physical world is gone. That which used to be the daydreaming part occupies all the space. Now, if I am aware that I am dreaming, while I am dreaming, there can be still some identification there, because I can switch somehow, as we do in ignorance, from whatever is perceived objectively, phenomenally, and in that case, that would be the elements that are appearing in the night dream, to a pseudo witness of the dream, which is an object with which we identify. And this object can be either thought or a bodily sensation. In the night dream, it's more likely to be some kind of a thought. So the ignorance, the support of ignorance is identification with some object. So it requires a support, an object to which we identify. So the fact that we know we are dreaming doesn't necessarily deprive us from ignorance if simultaneously we identify with an object which is then deemed to not be part of this dream, but nevertheless is a construct of the mind. So this form of lucid dreaming is not really freedom from ignorance. So Raman goes on. Therefore, can we say the one who is established in the teaching is a lucid waker, fearless in the waking world, knowing their true reality? Yes, there is nobody who is established in the teaching, right? It's there is only happiness, which is this lucid waker. So the difference is that the daydream and the night dream too appear in this background of tranquility, which is not affected by these upcoming images. As we get more and more established in it, this background becomes more and more present, so to speak, more and more almost tangible. It's like there is a transfer of reality away from the perceived world to this background of peace. So in a sense, it is similar to what happens as we wake up. In that sense, as we wake up from the dream, there is a transfer of reality from the world of the dream to the world of the waking state. However, in this case, it is a transfer of reality that operates from an object to another object. Just as in the lucid dreaming, without liberation, the transfer of reality operates from one set of perceptions in the dream, objective perception, to another perception, subjective perception, but still an object, still something perceived, limited, which is the alleged dreamer. So the benchmark of the true dreamer, of the Vishnu dreamer, if you will, is the peace. It is not something of the mind. It is not something that comes from the mind. Everything that comes from the mind is artificial. So this peace knows itself by itself directly, experiences itself. It cannot be made up. Okay, then Raman says, forgive all the fear talk. I work in healthcare here in Seattle. Okay. Yes, Raman. I have a son and his wife also in the Seattle area. Yes.
I have a question related to that when you have a chance.
Be cautious. Be cautious. Okay. Yes. So thank you, Raman. And okay, Pirus, you have the floor.
So hello again. And so pursuant to the same discussion about this question that Ramon asked, and I don't know if this is coming from ignorance, this question, and we agreed why is not that kind of question to ask, but it occurs to me that during the waking state, it is absolutely effortless to be able to abide in the self. But in a dream state, that is not, at least in my experience, possible. Is that even a valid question to ask?
Oh, it's a question. All questions that you have are valid. But in fact, it's as easy in in the dream state as it is in the waking state. There is no difference. It may seem different only if we construe abiding in the self as something we do, as something we kind of can practice, or something some kind of decision we make. This background of peace is always present, whether we are in the waking state or in the dream state. In fact, whether the waking objects or the dream objects are appearing or not. So this background reveals itself, I would say, almost concomitantly through all states. It's as if I can use a metaphor, the objects of the state become more transparent if we compare them to, marks that are placed on a canvas. As if they would become more transparent so that the background shines through them. And the transparency is the same no matter whether we are in the waking state or in the dream state. To use a better analogy to illustrate that, the objects of the waking state and of the dream state, let's assume they are like of pieces of glass of various colors. And behind these pieces of glass, there is a light. And the intensity of this light is variable. You can adjust it. And in fact, in ignorance, this light is switched off. So then, whatever the light which is behind this object being not visible, the objects are all there is to perceive. Both in the dream state, let's say object with warm colors, and in the waking state, let's see bluish, greenish objects in cold colors or cooler colors. Then there is a first moment when the light is switched on, and then it begins revealing itself through the objects. The objects are still visible. And then over time, the intensity of the light increases. And then the true nature of our seeing of the objects is understood to be the lights. It is the lights, in fact, that makes the objects visible. So, I mean, take this metaphor for whatever worth it has and then forget it right away. But that this idea that this increase in intensity of the piece is totally independent, in fact, from the objects that are appearing in front of it and seem to be veiling it. It is
Right.
this independence that I wanted to underline with this analogy.
That's exactly why I asked this question is I wanted to, pursuant to our discussion from yesterday about mysticism and all of that, which has shaken my ground, even though in a ridiculous way I laugh at it, but it's been a turmoil all past 24 hours. So I asked this question to make sure that I'm not hypnotizing or objectifying being the self in my waking state, hence my inability to sensing it or to being it during a dream state.
It happens, this shift, this increase of the intensity of the light happens or takes place over time. And what we see as a truth seeker, as a truth lover, is a different orientation of the mind, of where our thoughts go. Our thoughts go to the truth. Our perceptions are understood in a different light. And we could be under the impression, the false impression, in fact, that it is these thoughts, this activity, that brings about the changes, the increase in the light. It is just the opposite, in fact. It is the increase in the light that brings about all these changes in the mind and this apparent seeking. The seeking itself is an appearance. We have to see that. The seeking comes from the truth itself, like everything else. So there is no seeker. There is no local seeker. There is no local asker of a question. The question comes from the answer, and the answer is this presence. So the question comes from the answer and ends in the answer. And when it ends in the answer, the intensity of the light increases because some obstacles have been removed in the process. But it is all the work of the light. There is nobody, not a separate entity working towards liberation. That's in fact a relapse in ignorance that may lead us to believe, oh, I am a seeker, or I am making effort to find the truth. That is like the clown taking the bow after the ballerina performs to appropriate, to own the applause. But it's all the work of this reality. And the reality doesn't work, it only plays, of course. So that's only the play of this reality. There is no seeker, there is no effort, there is only the appearance of it.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, don't hesitate to unmute your mic and to...
Francis, I have a question.
Yes, Mary?
Yeah, it's about moments of bliss. So when I'm out walking, that I notice these moments of bliss, and I'm wondering, is it like, maybe you've already answered it, coming from the background, or is it mixture of states of bliss, or is it a bit of both?
Well, whatever amount of happiness we experience is always, it always comes from the background.
Oh, okay.
It is always the experience of the background. So if I use the metaphor that I just used of colored objects and a light behind them that, let's say, you know, these colored windows in a church and or colored glass panels, how do you call those? And the sun behind them that makes them shine. If you have always been in the church and have never seen the sun, it seems that the light emanates from this colored object, right? Then a glimpse of pure consciousness is like going out of this church and seeing the sun. And then you understand the true nature, the true origin of the light. Then you go back inside the church, but now you know that the light is simply the light which is transmitted and a little bit colored by the object, but the real source of the light is the sun. So in this metaphor, the sun is consciousness. The experience of the light is happiness, because that's the experience of consciousness by consciousness. It's experienced as love, beauty, happiness, intelligence, and the colored objects are like the manifestation. So in a sense, the sage and the ignorant see the same thing. They see the same objects. The sage knows the true nature of happiness, of the light. Any metaphor is limited because we really are the source of the light. In ignorance, we forget that. And then we desperately seek it. In wisdom, we are it knowingly, so we are never far from it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Hello, Francis.
Mary.
Thank you. You too, Francis.
Yeah.
Hello, Francis. I have a question. It looks like all experiences in consciousness limited to the body. Would it be if consciousness is universal? What would be the experience?
Who is it who is speaking? Who is speaking? I don't see you. That's weird.
Yes, hold on. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Amir, are you with Amy? No, Alex?
Yes.
It's Alex. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Let me. Yes, Alex, go ahead.
Okay, if consciousness is universal, would be universal, not limited just by the body experiences available to it.
Yes, because it is the same consciousness that experiences through all the instruments of perceptions, meaning all the bodies, all the minds, and whatever else is there out there in this vast reality. It is the same consciousness. However, in order to really enjoy the game, consciousness needs to kind of momentarily forget what it perceives, what it simultaneously perceives through other instruments. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun. For instance, let's say you meet this girl and you don't know whether she likes you or not. So that's exciting. You know, if you could read her mind instantaneously, it would take completely the fun out of the equation. It would be boring. You would know immediately. Or even as universal consciousness, you would decide immediately whether she likes you or not. I mean, it would be boring. You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. But on another hand, oh, yeah, sorry.
No. It's we have to understand that it's a privilege not to know everything. It is not an advantage to know everything, because then it becomes boring. If you know everything, if you direct everything, if you are the director of the movie, can you enjoy the movie? I ask you the question. No. In order to enjoy the movie, you need innocence. You need to be there, and you need to see the movie for the first time. The director of the movie has seen the movie 100 times and more. He has seen many movies before he decides to edit the movie in this way. So when he sees the movie, he doesn't enjoy it really. He enjoys perhaps being a director, as an artist. It's a different story. But a creating artist needs also an audience to enjoy. So God, the creating artist, also creates the audience and puts himself in the shoes of the audience. And here we are. We have to understand that it's a privilege not to know what is going to happen. Otherwise, life would be absolutely boring. And people think, otherwise they think, oh, if I only know what the stock market is going to be like tomorrow, if I only know, what number is going to come up at the roulette. Can you imagine how boring it would be at the casino? I mean, you would always know and you would always win. I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking is to kind of narrow maybe experiences which would point to the true nature of the consciousness. Which could be useful for awakening reasons. Yes.
Well, but you see, can you tell me about one phenomenal experience that you could think of as what we call a Gedanken experiment, a thought experiment, that would help you? Give me an example of something that would help you, that would convince you that consciousness is universal. Give me an example.
Well, I would say would be something what would be beyond limitations of the body, at least, because the body is actually.
Imagine an example. Give me an example. Don't say in abstract terms that you say something that would be beyond the. No, give me an example of an experience.
Well, example would come from my mind based on the previous experiences.
Not necessarily. No. Imagine a situation because basically what you are saying in your question is that, okay, I would need something that would take me beyond the mind, that could convince me, be beyond the limitation of my human mind, that would convince me that consciousness is universal. Right?
Yes.
So, imagine an example. For instance, I don't know.
Well, I would say after death experience or something, but I mean, how do you imagine that? You know?
No. For instance, something that takes you beyond your mind would be, for instance, something that takes you in somebody else's mind.
Well, I would assume if I go beyond my mind limitations, like the movie would be interesting, yeah. Like I would not be a director of my life movie, whatever is happening even right now.
Yes, I was trying. What I was trying to elicit in you is an effort of imagination, because in your question you seem to be asking. You seem to be, okay, in order for me to be certain that consciousness is universal, I need some experience, right?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, which one? What do you need?
Well, the kind of the point of my question is actually that could any experience point to the like true nature of consciousness? Yeah. Because actually, like what happened with people, well, they have some experiences and they say like this is kind of pointed me or lead to awakening and so on and so on. You know, like recently I heard your interview. I think it was at Sand, where you were saying that when we mention consciousness or reality and so on, it brings us closer to nature. Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, but I would, well, if anybody else who is hearing this dialogue has an idea of an experience that would help them getting convinced that consciousness is universal, please take the mic and share it with us.
Yeah, because at this point I would like or debunk that theory at all. You know, but any experience can actually point us or help us with awakening, yeah, with seeing the true nature. Because even this talk right now, what our conversation is also an experience, and something is going on.
Yes.
And it is phenomenal.
No, I mean,
no.
That which convinces us is not phenomenal. That's the point. What is phenomenal are words and thoughts. But the words and the thoughts are not the understanding of the words and of the thoughts. So whereas the words and the thoughts are phenomenal, the understanding of the words and the thoughts is not phenomenal. That which convinces us, in fact, is not the words and the thoughts, because then everybody would be instantaneously convinced upon hearing the words and thinking the thoughts, which shows that that which convinces us is something else. It is the understanding of the words and of the thoughts. And the understanding of the words and of the thoughts is not a word or a thought. The understanding of the words and of the thoughts is beyond the words and the thoughts. Whereas the words and the thoughts are phenomenal, the understanding of the words and the thoughts is non-phenomenal. So the point I'm making is that which convinces us is essentially non-phenomenal. And that whatever is phenomenal cannot convince us in this case. It is very different from science, because in science it's just the opposite. It is phenomenal facts that convince us of the truth of a hypothesis or of a theory. Because science is about phenomena. But here, phenomenal facts cannot convince us. It is our understanding that convinces us. And our understanding is a form of experience of consciousness, in fact. That's why whenever we make the claim that I wish I had some kind of experience that could convince me that consciousness is universal, the only thing we have to understand is that this type of experience is impossible. In other words, no phenomenal experience can bring about this conviction that consciousness is universal. That's the bad news. However, there is a good news. The silver lining to this is that, yes, no phenomenal experience can convince us that consciousness is universal. But the converse is equally true. No phenomenal experience can convince us that it isn't universal. That's the beauty of it. And that's the only important thing that I want you to understand. So no phenomena, and that is a hard thing to understand. That no phenomenal experience can prove or disprove the universality of that consciousness is universal. That is.
Would it be when that just what occurred to me that just calling consciousness universal or non-universal, like but both statements kind of not true. Yes, but consciousness is beyond that or non-definable. This is just like just because we want somehow to convey it and to express it, we give it that practically that term, yeah, that definition, universal or not. But,
but it depends how you define consciousness. If you agree with my definition, which is that which is really hearing these words right now, the reality which is hearing these words, that's my definition of consciousness.
Yes, beyond instrument of hearing. Is that right?
What?
Beyond instrument of hearing.
Oh yes,
So practically
whatever
itself.
whatever truly hears, you hear through the ears, but the reality that hears is also the reality that sees. It is also the reality that thinks. So the ear doesn't think, the ear doesn't see. So the reality that hears and sees is beyond the eyes and beyond the ears. So I define there is an element of reality that is beyond the shadow of a doubt in perceiving. Perceiving is real.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever is perceived could be an illusion, but perceiving is real. And this element of reality, that which truly perceives, is what I call consciousness.
Francis, would it be helpful to make a distinction between...
I'm sorry, but I would like to keep on with the questioner unless the questioner agrees to leave the floor and to open up to another question.
Yes.
Would it be helpful
Yes.
if he's willing, intuitive apperception to differentiate the experience of phenomena from the point of view of reality? Intuitive apperception is a non-experience, but I know it. Since I was a little boy, there was a part of me that looked out my eyes that said, nothing's changed. I turned 7 years old, and I said, something in here says, I don't feel any different. And when
Yes.
I came to see you in person and in the atmosphere of your home, that seemed to have more intensity of a joy and an awareness, but it's never been where I totally identify as that intuitive apperception yet, and I'm assuming that's something that can grow more foreground or more present.
Yes, as the mind and the body purify themselves from the usual objects with which we identify, this perception shines more and more clearly. It's like a diamond. When they are found, they are not shiny. They are, because they are surrounded by some mineral materials. So then they need to remove these mineral materials, and then they get cut and polished, and then they shine. So it's the same thing here. These habits of identification, or these usual objects of identification in the mind and in the body, I mean as on the conceptual and perceptual level, have to somehow be debunked, so that consciousness remains unattached to objects.
So another question in that regard is, awareness focused on an object has one felt quality, but when awareness is focusing on reality, it's something that's vast. Reality, to focus on reality, there's this intuitive felt sense of presence of reality that is so subtle. It's not any object in reality, it's the actual contextual, intuitive presence of reality. As opposed to, but at any moment I can focus on a little object, whether it's an itch on my face or a pressure in my neck, but it seems like a certain knack of whistling that you're teaching people, or how to awaken as this more global, broad attention. And what's the difference between attention and awareness?
Well, let's not, it's because attention suggests to me some kind of effort. Whereas love is effortless. You see, when a boy is in love with a girl, or a girl in love with a boy, it doesn't require effort for them to think of the beloved, right? It's an effortless thought, so to speak. So it can be interpreted as attention, but it's effortless attention. So when we are in love with love itself, this attention is always effortless. What I want to say is this, regarding what you mentioned, regarding this glimpse of our true nature, this apperception. The apperception leads us to this state, but this is a timeless moment. Immediately thereafter, the world reappears. The mind, the body, the world reappear. In the first moment of their reappearance, they are at peace because they reappear out of the peace of the glimpse. And they remain at peace up until a subsequent relapse in ignorance takes place, in which we again identify with an object, in which we go back to the old habits, and in which we kind of go back into, we lose the perfume that was present in the glimpse. However, glimpse after glimpse, the relapse into ignorance gets delayed. And the state of ignorance that follows the relapse becomes shorter. So in the beginning, it could say that in total ignorance, we are stable in the relapse. Then there is a first apperception that down the road we trigger more instantaneous apperceptions. And then around this apperception, while the world, the mind and the body are present, the peace is already present. And then this peace kind of bleeds over.
Déjà commencé.
Bleeds over the presence of objects, the presence of the world. And then it connects with a peace that bleeds over other glimpses. So then it becomes almost quasi-permanent in the presence of objects. So that's what has to be understood. And the practical lesson to take from that is to know that when a glimpse has occurred, when what you call, yes, an apperception of our true nature has occurred, that there is nothing that needs to be done, that there is no effort to be made, that we are just perfect in this moment, because in this moment we can check that we have no problems, that we have no, and that as long as we stick to the truth that was revealed by the glimpse, no problem can come up. It's only when we deliberately, conveniently forget the glimpse that we become unfaithful, if you will, to the glimpse, that we cheat on the glimpse, and then there is a price to pay.
Thank you.
Hi, can I suggest, going back to your remark about the thought experiment, or suggesting an experience that would be convincing
Okay,
about
that's
universal
interesting.
consciousness? Sorry?
I am interested. I'm
Okay.
all ears.
Yeah. Okay, so if I am universal consciousness, which you define as the reality that is hearing these words, I would like to, at will, hear words that are going on somewhere else. I can hear yours and mine, which are coming through, well, yours are coming through my laptop in my sitting room, and I can hear mine. The reality that hears is not my ears, but can I then, at will, hear the words coming from a conversation in another room or another country?
We have some interference here. Please unmute your mics unless you are speaking. I have to check that everybody is. Please mute your mics unless you're just speaking. So, Alice, is it Lindsay who is talking?
Oh, sorry, that was Judith.
Okay, so let me mute Lindsay. Okay, yes, Judith. So let's assume that what you say is the case, that you can at will, for instance, go to my thought, to my mind, and see my mind the way I see my mind, to speak a common language. Is that the assumption that you want me to make?
I guess so, although I was thinking in terms of hearing a conversation that is going on in another room or city or country.
Yeah,
Same
so
thing. Yeah.
let's say you are there as one of the participants in a meeting somewhere else, and you remotely have access to their mind, and you hear the conversation.
Yes.
So you are saying that would convince you that consciousness is universal.
Well, I am happily.
Yes or no?
No, it probably wouldn't. I am more convinced by the glimpses, happily.
Right.
But then why can't I do that?
You see, Judith, because what many people have had telepathic experiences, and do they become sages or liberated? No way, because their interpretation of their experience was that somehow their separate consciousness was connecting to another separate consciousness, and that they were, through this communication, be able to see what the other consciousness was seeing. In other words, that didn't lead them to the conviction that there was only one consciousness, but that leads them to the understanding that there is a connection. But as we speak right now, there is a connection between us.
Yes.
In other words, for this connection between us to be the case, you and I need to belong to the same reality. Otherwise, such a connection, no matter how, no matter which model we have for this interaction to take place, no matter whether we have a physical model or a different model, for that to take place, you and I, both the receiving end and the shipping end, if you will, have to belong to the same reality because they are connected. And if I define consciousness as this reality, we are one.
Yes.
So that's a more convincing argument than the interpretation according to which there are two separate, in fact, minds that communicate. And through this type of unusual telepathic transmission, the unusual, miraculous telepathic transmission doesn't add, in fact, anything to the ordinary transmission we are having right now.
Yes, that's good. Although, is the fact that you kind of appear to be in my sitting room on my laptop screen, although you're obviously thousands of miles away, is that making it more special or more ordinary? I kind of get.
Is that making what?
Is it making the fact that it's the same reality that's hearing my words and your words? It kind of feels more convincing because I know that you're thousands of miles away and you're not in my sitting room. Perhaps.
But I mean, this reality is both ordinary and, as we explore its mysteries, extraordinary, right?
Yes. It feels extraordinary because you're not physically in my room. If my husband walked in here and we had a conversation, I'd go back to thinking that's two consciousnesses talking to each other. But as you speak and I'm speaking now, it does feel more like the same consciousness.
Yeah, the chain of transmission is more complicated. It's more complex. It's digitalized. It goes through all kinds of cables and through all kinds of computers in the world. And so it's much more complicated than simply sound waves, waves of differences of pressure in the air from the mouth of your husband to your eardrums.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, it goes through the same reality in both cases. What enables them is the fact that you and I share the same reality.
Yes. No, that's good. Thank you.
Francis, can I ask a brief question?
Go ahead, Philip.
Yes, hello. Nice to talk to you again. We met in Paris briefly in January. I had a question then which I did not formulate, that I would like to reformulate briefly. And it's a question which is related to something I now realize I've been doing for most of my life, and which is called spiritual bypassing. If you're familiar with the term, which
spiritual what?
Spiritual bypassing.
Bypass? No, I'm not familiar with the term.
Actually, the fact of using spirituality and spiritual practice to bypass or to numb, for example, intense childhood trauma, which actually I discovered fairly recently, happened in my early childhood. So I'd like to make sure, I mean, first of all, obviously, I'd like to make sure I'm not doing the same kind of spiritual bypassing with the non-dual teachings. But most importantly, I would like to know your opinion about whether you think it is possible to fulfill both the spiritual aspiration and also to deal simultaneously with the resolution of childhood trauma when it is discovered late in life. And if so, what is the approach that you would recommend for that?
As long as the past doesn't come into the present, it is non-existent. As long as the past doesn't affect the present, it is as good as non-existent.
You're right.
Yes, that is quite forgotten often, and it is a very simple truth. So, in other words, we don't have to deal with non-existent things. So when the past comes into the present, it is always a fake past, because it's only a recollection of things, right? Therefore, it's not the things themselves. The things themselves, they have happened, but they are long gone. So that simplifies a lot our slate, if you will, because then we have to deal only not with past events, but with our recollections or the residues of them, and we have to deal with those only when they arise. So now, if we identify with them or with someone who is affected by them, a human being who is affected by them, then we became hostage of them. In other words, they have on us the power that we allowed them to have. We have to understand that clearly. To the extent that we believe to be a separate human being who is having these problems, we are going to have these problems and we are going to keep them. Because the more we try to get rid of them, in fact, the more we cling to them. So the best way to deal with the past is not to seek the past, not to make any effort. When residues of the past come up, is to welcome them with benevolent indifference, to see them for what they are as bodily sensations and thoughts arising in this presence, which they cannot affect any more than a bird flying in the sky affects the sky through which it flies, or the sky it crosses. So we let these birds from the past, this recollection, these bodily sensations and thoughts, cross the sky of our awareness without trying to catch them, without trying to kill them, and without trying to change their flight plan. That's the best, this benevolent indifference and this benign forgetting of those is the best way to handle these. In other words, you don't prevent these birds from entering your sky, but you don't try to interact with them. Know that you are not affected by those bodily sensations that you call feelings, but that are in fact only bodily sensations and thoughts. Yes. That can be images, irrational stuff, fears, etc.
Yeah. Even though somehow, all those bodily sensations and thoughts have had an impact on choices, decisions, and have placed my life in a direction which sometimes I feel I could have avoided, and it's not what ideally I would have chosen had those events not happened.
Yeah, but I understand that. But you have to be true to yourself. We are all different. It requires courage. It requires to see the facts and to accept the facts fully and to embrace your own qualities, you have to see the beauty of it. And you have to see also that all this past trauma and whatever you have experienced in your life was in fact designed to take you to the truth. All the disappointments, all the mistakes, all of that. It was not useless.
No, it wasn't. You're right. That's the best way to look at it.
And so it's stupid to have any regrets about the past events in our life, because they were just measured to take us to the next step. It was only a game that we played perfectly. In fact, we never made mistakes. We just played the game.
This is very radical, and I agree that it demands courage, and that's
and honesty with yourself and with others, and love. Honesty and love.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you.
And no
Francis,
fear.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, yes. Let's see whether everybody else is muted. Yeah, Ben and Eyal.
Yeah. Great being here.
Just a second, let me mute Philip. Okay, yes, there we go.
So I have a question about maybe the sense of separate ownership or financial anxiety, or like the way my mind used to think of there's inconsistency between doing what I love doing and doing what will make me money or will get me financial stability, and maybe how to explore that and how to maybe conduct some experiments or maybe change that old mindset about money and ownership and abundance.
Well, the first thing to do is to be very realist about the context you are in, to see the facts. And to use your intelligence to take the next move, and the move thereafter, and the move thereafter, and the move thereafter. So, in regard to this, we have to find a balance between three aspects. In fact, it's only two. Freedom on the relative level and how much money we make. Freedom means the freedom to do what I want. So this freedom can be achieved in two ways. Either through financial independence, because I don't have to work, or the kind of work I have to get money is minimal. My teacher used to say no more than 4 hours a day. Or because the kind of work I have to make money, I love it. Therefore, even if I wouldn't make money out of it, I would still be doing it. It's called a vocation. Then when you exercise a vocation, then you are free. However, every vocation will involve some chores. So even if you have a vocation, there will be things that are involved in it that are a little bit like working 4 hours a day to be free the rest of the time. So these are the parameters. How much money do I need? How much do I want? How to alienate my freedom? What amount of chores is acceptable for me? That varies. It's your choice. It's a fine-tuning that each of us has to make. Not only it's a fine-tuning that each of us has to make, but it's a fine-tuning that will evolve over time. There is something else regarding the ability to make money. Is that it is very important to liberate yourself from the belief system that we have inherited from culture, from society, etc., that money is the essential element in our life. There are a few items like that, that to some extent are considered to be the most important elements in our life. For some people, it's money. For other people, it's power. For other people, it's relationships. For other people, it's fame and recognition by others. For other people, it's being loved. For other people, it's health, etc. And all of these items have something in common. They all revolve around fear. In other words, fear of being without money, fear of not being loved, fear of not having a relationship, fear of being sick. But if we think of all of those, they boil down to one single thing, which is kind of fear of death. So the only way really to address this problem with money, with relationship, with fear of death, with feeling alone or lonely, all of this is to address this fundamental question, this fear of absolute disappearance, which is tied together with the belief to be this human body, or to be a separate human mind, whatever. Only to the extent that we address this fundamental question, and that's what truth seekers or truth lovers do, is that they have understood that all their problems are in fact related to this central issue. They are just different manifestations that varies depending on individual circumstances, the kind of culture, society, the kind of parents, the kind of education, etc. Unless you understand that the first thing to address is the true cause of these attachments to money, sex, relationship, health, wealth, fame, etc. Even if through a great deal of effort you resolve one of these problems, let's say you become very wealthy, so you don't have money problem, but still you have a problem in a relationship, problem in health, you're not happy. So now, going back to that, regarding specific issues with money, with relationships, to the extent that we are attached to the money issue, to the relationship issue, to the health issue, we keep having recurrent problems with money, recurrent problems with relationships, recurrent problems with health. Because life wants to teach us that that is not the real reason. So in terms of financial liberation, and that's if you will, the law of abundance, is that you will get true abundance to the extent that you are detached from money. But it's not easy to detach oneself from money. It's not something that we can decide by pushing a button. If you are attached, we are attached, because we believe that that's a solution to our problem. So we have to understand first that it is not the solution to our problem. That will bring some detachment toward this problem. Same thing. If we are attached to relationships and obsessed by them, we have to understand that that is not really the source of our problem. That will give us some distance, and we are not going to be as attached in our relationship. And because we are not as attached in our relationships, our relationship will be easier, more harmonious. We won't be as needy in them. Same thing with health and other issues. So when it applies to money, we call it the law of abundance. In other words, when it applies to relationship, I don't know what we call it. But the general rule is, to the extent that we are detached to a category of objects we were attached to, such as money, to the extent that through our intelligence, through our understanding, we detach ourselves from that. To that extent, the universe will eliminate the problems we had in this category. So then you may find a job that pleases you, you may find a way to make money, or your distant relative, filthy wealthy in America will pass away and leave you a trust fund to live from. So that's the general idea.
Thank you.
Hello, Francis.
Yes, Alice?
Alice, I'm saying hello from Prague. Thank you. And hello, everybody there. Some of you I know, we've met at Francis' beautiful home. I just like your approach to life as being the director of the movie and directing your movie. And as our friend here was talking about the money, I'm in the stage of kidney transplant or kidney disease that it's, any day I can end up on dialysis, and I've been in and out of hospital. But like you say, I have now been in your teaching and Rupert's teaching for very deep 5 years, and I'm so kind of detached from my body, yet I take good care of it, that when they operate or do anything, I can be totally, like you say, the director and observe the body. Yet there are still moments where the Maya pulls in and the fear comes in. So my question is, when you are at this level in and out and in and out, and really you are not in control, how do you deal with it to not allow the fear take over once again?
With the fear is of two kinds. We have a fear of suffering, and there is a fear of disappearance. They are not the same. The fear of suffering is the fear of unknown experience. I remember as a kid, I had a series, I was very, very young, a series of injections of penicillin in my buttock. It was extremely painful, and the kid, a small child, was perhaps 4, is very sensitive to this pain. And the doctors and the nurses were not my friends. And every time the nurse would come to give me these injections, I had this fear. Now, this fear is completely normal, because as a child, the pain was big. Adults, they don't remember how sensitive a child is. As you get older, you're less sensitive. You go to the dentist, he does his things, and You go, you take some Advil after that or whatever, and then you have this big surgery, you wake up, it's like a train has run over you, they give you some morphine, and 5 days later you're home and you still have pain, but it's very different. It's very different. So, who is that? And who is it? Who? Yes. So this fear is normal. Usually this fear goes away when you actually face the facts, because the fact is whatever it is.
It is.
And it's not as big a deal. As we get older, it comes with the territory, right?
Yes.
And we kind of accept it and get used to it. So in this fear, it's just going through it. That I had a boss. He was a very nice man in France. He was a préfet de région in Marseille. And he once told me, Francis, the events that we deem to be terrible, when they happen, they are never as terrible as we had projected them to be. And the one who deem to be pleasurable and pleasant, when they truly happen, they are never as pleasant as we had deemed them to be. You see? So that's what something we learn through getting older. That's a street wisdom, if you will. It's not Advaita wisdom, it's a street wisdom.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the other fear is the fear of absolute disappearance, and the fear of death, and the fear of having missed our life, of having done the wrong thing, of having regrets, and so on. And in fact, everything has been perfect. Everything has been, we have done our best at every moment. We have done the best we could. And then we have reached this knowledge and this love for the truth and this deep intuition that the reality which is hearing these words never came into being and never ceases to be. Whatever we want will be. But I wish you well in this body, and I hope you find whatever doctors, transplants, whatever you need to help you in life.
Thank you. One more question. How do you deal with your parents, 80-year-old parents who are, because I'm fine with it. It's more the family, the children, and the husband that I think you have that feeling of, like you say, disappearance, and they cannot imagine not to have me there. And that is putting more pressure on my just accepting things as they are, because the family, for the last, let's say, I'm 57 years old, 45 years, I've been dealing with this disease, yet they still haven't accepted it as it is the truth. So that there you have that pull of that family, and you are okay with that.
Yes, you have to understand that what is true for you, namely that all events in your life didn't happen by chance, that they were all pushing you towards wisdom.
Yes.
What was true for you is true for them. And whatever will happen in the future is what they needed for their moving to the next step, if you will.
Yeah.
So you are not responsible as a person, as a human mind. There is no responsibility. The responsibility is somewhere else. And really all is well and unfolding as it should.
Okay. Okay.
So, but life is beautiful. Don't give up.
It is. I live a perfect life. I am in Prague and well, this virus, but otherwise, I have great doctors. You know, Prague is beautiful. You know, and
but stay inside because you don't want to catch this coronavirus in your
correct. Anyways, thank you so much, and thank you everybody, beautiful souls. I just feel so much love. I don't know. The more fear, I just feel so much joy because we are safe. Like even in the hospital, right away they give you transplant, they give you blood. We are one consciousness. That's how I see it. So when you were asking that question, for me, how can you not see it that we are one? When I can have your organ and when I can have your blood, and I love you all. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does knowing who you truly are affect the relative or just the daily life? For example, if anger or bitterness comes up, would it even come up, or if it came up, it wouldn't bother you?
Normally it wouldn't come up. And if it come up, it would be short-lived. And afterwards, you would accept it, what has happened, with benevolence, without having any regrets. Everything is a cosmic event, everything that happens, including ignorance. So why bother? Now, anger is an example of ignorance-triggered reaction, because anger arises out of frustration. Typically, how did he or she or God dare do that to me? That in the me, to me, separate from him, from her, or from God. I'm separate, and they did that to me. How did they dare? You see, so anger always comes from this sense of separation. Frustration triggers anger.
So can I use that as a measure? If I feel anger, then I've identified with something.
Yeah, but the very fact to measuring the level, your level of freedom comes from ignorance. Because whose level of freedom? Who is more or less free? You know, either you are freedom itself or you are cooked. So choose to be freedom itself. Okay, I'm going to keep the questions offline for next week. Thank you all for being there. I wish you well. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.